I think about our mission. I think about our vision and kind of who we are. We have purpose statements, the employees, we have a purpose statement. What is our purpose? Part of our purpose is to ensure that the lives of our customers and communities are made better because of Mascoma Savings and because of its employees. That's part of our purpose.
People around watching, making phone calls. Do you see the gas leak? Do you see the gas coming out of those? No. You see the smoke?
Oh, what's making the smoke?
That's propane right there.
Oh, blowing up?
Yeah, that's propane blowing off the tanks.
A woman knocked on my door. She said, "I need your help." And I didn't know her. And I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "I can't get to my children."
The water was so turbulent and so isolated at that point that we couldn't do a rescue with the amount of people we had. So all we could tell him was to climb to the top of the house and ride it out.
And he said in a minute, literally in 1 minute, once that got started, the water got around under and behind that road and took the whole thing right in front of his eyes.
I remember looking over and seeing their garage and their house, thinking that's getting really close to their house. By the afternoon, their house was gone.
On Woodstock, I'm on the covered bridge.
I was in awe of the power of water. The gentle streams just turned into something different and made a new journey for themselves.
I thought that day, we're going to have stuff to do tomorrow, being Sunday, but what shall I do today? There's no sense sitting around fretting about it. So I took my boat and headed for the Connecticut River for a day of fishing.
We were down to Mascoma Lake in New Hampshire the day before, and we were camping down there with a bunch of families, and the joke of the day was that Hurricane Irene was coming.
I remember it started to rain in the night, Saturday night, I remember rain. Sunday morning, it was just raining hard, just steady, and it never let up.
It sounded like a train, but I knew it wasn't the train. And I looked over the banking, and I've never seen that brook as wide as it was that day.
The water came right up to the garage, and then came up to the door, and then came up to the window, and then broke through the windows.
There was literally waves of water coming back across 12, almost like an ocean.
There's flooding, people are trapped in houses, the water's over the bridge. So I said, well, let me call George, the road commissioner. So I called him. He said, I'm stuck up on Hawk.
Finally crested somewhere around 11 maybe, within an inch of coming in the building, but it never came in the building. But the whole building, all the way around, was completely cut off by water.
There's a steep bank right across from the town garage, and chunks of it, half the size of this building, kept falling down into the river and disappearing instantly. Just being swept away. And you could hear we could see it, and we could hear that crashing. And I think at that time, probably for the first time since I was a younger man, I really felt kind of a terror.
When we turned the corner onto Camp Brook to park, you could see 3 telephone poles just swinging in the air by their wires because the road was washed out. And it was like, I remember just stopping. It's like, whoa, the road's gone.
And then one of the firemen on the other side said that there was someone in a trailer waving a flashlight yelling for help.
So I pulled up there, I said, the animals are in the truck, I gotta go back to work. And they're like, here's all the animals, and like, my youngest son goes, where's my rabbit? I'm like, what do you mean, where's your rabbit? It's in the box right there. She said, he said, that's Maddie's rabbit, not mine. My heart sunk.
We saw the whole herd of cows all near trees with their heads barely above the water. And the rain just kept coming, and we're watching bales of hay go down the river, and we just couldn't believe it. This whole herd was just trying to survive. And, you know, they just got their heads up. And
you could hear all night trees, I mean big trees, hitting the new bridge. And again, they had just built that bridge 2 or 3 years before the storm came through. You could hear the trees hitting the I-beam of the bridge all night. It was like someone was ringing a big gong down there all night.
Then the middle of the night, around 2 o'clock, I got the call that we had to evacuate emergency management. I mean, think about that for a minute. Our emergency management center underwater. So I get the call, Governor, we've got to evacuate the emergency management center, and we've got to move the patients out of the state hospital.
The magnitude of it got so bad that, you know, we just didn't know. You know, what is going to be here in the morning? Is downtown Bethel going to be here in the morning? We had no idea.
I just thank God every day that the sun was shining that day, because if it had been cold and rainy and dark, it would have been very hard to see any positive in all of that mess. I mean, it looked like a war zone down here. The road was missing. Our half of the road was missing. Our neighbor's house had slid completely off its foundation and collapsed on itself. Their car was turned up against our tree here in the backyard. My gardens were gone.
We were trapped here. Well, 2 bridges were out on the south end of town, and there was a bridge out on the north end of town as well.
We lost the general store, we lost the post office, we lost the library, and there was as many as 6 or 8, 10 homes that were severely damaged from the flood.
The mobile home park had to be evacuated, and it was a horrible sight to see the devastation that had occurred over there. You could smell fuel oil in the air, and it was like a scene from a war movie. It was just incredible to look at. Silt and debris and fumes that were just permeating the air. And
I said, I gotta find and see if that rabbit's alive. Because I told my son the night before, he asked me, he said, Dad, do they know how to swim? I said, all animals know how to swim. So I came in and kicked in my own back door because it wouldn't open. And I come around the island there, and I look into the living room there, and our big and oversized stuffed chair that used to sit on the back wall was blocking the doorway. And on top of the back of the chair was the bunny rabbit sitting there And most of the time when you go to pick this rabbit up, it'll bite you or attack you. I went right over and picked that rabbit up. Still had my trooper uniform because I had no other clothes. Opened it up and tucked it right in my shirt, and I walked out with it. So I could have cared less about the house.
The toughest part for me was just day after day after day of hugging people and giving people support for whom you really couldn't do much right away. You know, we lost 7 Vermonters, so obviously I was meeting with family members there. Tragic stories, you know, just unbelievable things that will always be imprinted in my mind. But then all the people who had lost everything they knew materially, all of their, not only just their houses, that's big, but also all of the photographs and the family history and everything that they cared about was gone.
People started to filter in, and as they filtered in, and this happened probably until December, you heard their story, and every story was different. And I was so proud of the way that these guys here, my staff, they listened, they hugged, they, you know, got people's statements because they'd lost things in the flood. They didn't even know how much money they had. They didn't even have a checkbook with them.
I went to my wife and said, we can't afford to do anything else but stay here. And I have a good feeling about it. And she thought I was crazy. The kids thought I was crazy. She called my best friend and said, Paul's lost his mind. He's going to try and save this house. And my buddy came over and talked to me. He said, what are you doing? That was Wednesday afternoon. I made the decision. And I just got on my phone and started making phone calls. I called another friend of mine who has trucks and trailers. I called another friend that had an excavator. And I just said, I'm coming to get this stuff. I said, I got to try and save my house.
I think what makes Vermont special is that you're a community, and it doesn't matter about what the event is, whether it's snow or rain or just a loss of something. Vermont pulled together, and I think you do that every day. So I think what happened was just on a bigger scale of what happens every day in Vermont.
Every woodchuck in town who owns a piece of equipment got on it and went to work trying to do something. Not by any request from the town or anybody, they realized this was serious and just got busy and did stuff.
Our participation, we didn't really see any boundaries to it. We just tried to pitch in as much as we could, in however way we could. We had a generator, we had hot water, we've got food, so people stayed here, took showers. Some of our staff got here and lived here for a week.
I think it was a really powerful thing for the residents of this community to see how we all worked together and made things happen on our own little island without other people helping us. It was a real powerful thing, very emotional. I think people felt real proud to be part of Pittsfield.
A gentleman stopped by and he saw us jacking up the house and shoring it up, and he's like, do you need steel beams? It was Victor Boulay from East Bethel. I said, yep. He says, I got some in my field. I took off a job 5 years ago. I'll be back. He came back with those beams, 2 excavators, and he stayed for the next 2 days and helped us put the beams under the house and make sure our house was secured. Just showed up out of the blue.
And there was a woman out there who'd lost her house. She'd lived there most of her life. She'd lost everything. Total devastation. I gave her a hug. We talked for a while. Tears running down her face. She turned to me with nothing left. And she said, I got to go across the brook to help out my friends because my neighbors actually got hit harder than I did. And off she went to help her neighbor.
I remember one of my fellow selectmen commenting at the end of one of the days that he said, "Christ, men are riding around in trucks laughing together that haven't spoken for 15 years." So in that regard, while it was a tragic event, it awakened a part of the human spirit that we probably could stand to see a little more often.
To see the line of people emptying the Feeney's house out. I mean, they just literally had set a chain up and they were emptying the whole house and putting it into a truck to salvage whatever they could salvage. And they were doing what was going to take a 2-day job. They did it in hours. It was just absolutely amazing. And when you see the pictures of the house tipped over, you know, Paul and some friends had got a beam underneath it to stop it from tipping over. But that, right off the bat, that's one of those things where you say, wow, I mean, that was an eye-moistening moment. And it was total strangers. You know, community, anybody that saw it just stopped and got in the line and started passing stuff through.
And when Debbie came up and we were sitting in this very room and I said, what are we going to do? We've got to do something. And we both said, let's do a barbecue. I called Samantha up and she said, absolutely. And then it just kind of played out how once the senior management of Mascoma realized what had happened up here and the extent of it, they just so rallied. It was what we are.
There's a role that needs to happen at important times and when there is hard work to do. And you can have all of the talent, all of the resource in the world, but if somebody doesn't convene it and bring it together, it doesn't gel and it doesn't respond and it doesn't work well. And Mascoma served as an important convener.
They're a great community bank, and that picnic, I remember being down there and the people coming in, and it was just pulled the community together.
And the Bethel barbecue is going to stick with me for the rest of my life because it's one of those things where we really felt we needed to do something to try to help the folks in that community because they were hurting so badly. We had VITA, we had SBA, we had FEMA, the Haven, behavioral services. I mean, we just had so many folks there to try to help. And I was amazed that we were able to do that so quickly. You know, it was just a couple of days we were able to put all of that together.
It was an overwhelming thing to think of how to restore all the public infrastructure that had been damaged. And I would credit Mascoma Savings Bank with an enormous debt of gratitude here that we owe them. The funds were made available to us to enable us to buy supplies, hire contractors, pay contract obligations without any qualifications or reservations. What we had need of, they stood behind us and provided.
I'm a big believer in small community banking, and Mascoma is as good an example of that as you're going to find anywhere in America, certainly anywhere in Vermont. They came in and said, listen, how do we help? They went into communities and said, how can we help municipalities get the resources they need, the cash right now to help rebuild? How do we get to our customers and individuals who got hit so hard, the business capital they need right now, not tomorrow, but now. Got rid of red tape, went through processes they otherwise, shortened processes that would have been longer, got capital to businesses. But most importantly, went to people who had lost their homes or had lost their businesses and said, listen, we're here to help you during this time of crisis. We're going to forgive payments that you would have had to make because we know you don't have a job right now. Or we're going to make sure you get the capital you need to help you rebuild. Or we're not going to hammer on you to foreclose on your house because you lost it. And that's the kind of example that you want from good corporate citizens. But as I've said to my friends at Mascoma, they were the example, a great example of how a bank really gives back to a community by being there for them when the chips are down, and that's what Mascoma did.
I think they were kind of a little bit sad when we had to go back to work to our different towns and the kids went back to school, and there's a little bit of sadness that special time was over. Even though it was a horrible time and I never want to go through it again, it was a special time and magical time as well.
And I couldn't breathe. I felt like my whole world was just collapsing. And this little tiny woman was standing right at the door. And she opened up her arms and she just enveloped me. And I was probably a good 1.5 feet taller than her. But she had this little fishing hat and little rubber boots. And I've asked so many people, does this woman sound familiar to you? Does this woman sound, and nobody knows who that woman was. But she saved me that day. Because she just grabbed a hold of me and she held on to me. My mom couldn't be here. She couldn't get here if she'd wanted. His family couldn't have gotten here if they wanted. And she just held me like a mom. And she just said, everything's going to be all right.
You know, the biggest lesson for me wasn't so much a lesson as it was a reminder that we live in a state where people care about their neighbors, where they take care of strangers, total strangers, reach out to them, give them the help they need.
Part of being in the Upper Valley is to be a neighbor. There is truly a quality of reciprocity and mutuality that is at the heart of this community.
That's the lesson of Irene. There is no place that you can live where people take care of each other and care about each other more than in this great state of Vermont.